On September 29, 2025, Russia officially withdrew from a key human rights treaty, the European Convention for the Prevention of Torture, or CPT. This political move can create serious changes in the treatment of detainees. As for the protection of prisoners of war, or POWs, in Russia, it remains uncertain whether they will still have it or not. But what exactly is the Anti-Torture European Convention? To put it simply, it's a treaty by the Council of Europe signed and adopted on November 26, 1987. It entered into force on February 1, 1989. To note, it was formed by a broader European body made up of 46 member states, not the EU, to reinforce the prohibition of torture. This is to further calibrate Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights, or ECHR, which states, "No one shall be subjected to torture or to inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment." This article is an absolute right, and it doesn't allow any exceptions or derogations even during wars or public emergencies. The Council serves to monitor and, most of all, prevent cases rather than waiting for abused individuals to be discovered by bringing their legal cases only after the torture has occurred. The European Committee for the Prevention of Torture, or CPT, is composed of independent, impartial experts elected by the Committee of Ministers. These experts conduct regular and ad hoc inspections of detention facilities to monitor the treatment of detainees and make recommendations. The CPT usually visits places of detention like prisons, police stations, and even immigration centers. The routine of a CPT after each visit would include sending a confidential report to the state, making recommendations to improve conditions and treatment. Meanwhile, it is the state's discretion whether to reveal the report publicly. Often, many do. But now that Russia withdrew from the Anti-Torture Pact, this means that there can be no more independent visits. Let's take a look at Russia's journey with this treaty. Russia became a member of the Council of Europe on February 28, 1996. This signaled the commitment that Russia was willing to take towards integrating with European norms, including its human rights standards, after the fall of the Soviet Union. On May 5, 1998, Russian President Boris Yeltsin ratified the CPT Convention. Yeltsin served as the first president of the Russian Federation and ratified several key international human rights treaties under his reign. CPT inspections were allowed, including those that are unannounced. Over the years, around 30 visits have occurred within Russia. 8 were periodic and 22 were ad hoc. These visits came back with reports on police brutality and torture during interrogations. They also reported inhumane prison conditions with overcrowding and a lack of medical care. One of the most recent ad hoc visits of the CPT was conducted from October 19 to October 29, 2018. The committee wanted to examine the conditions of the people held in psychiatric and social care establishments in Kazan, Volgograd, Moscow, Angarsk, Babushkin, and Krasnoarmeyskaya. After the full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February 24, 2022, the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe decided to suspend Russia's rights of representation. On March 15, 2022, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, or PACE, unanimously adopted an opinion stating that Russia can no longer be a member of the Council of Europe due to its actions. Russia was in violation of Article 3 of the Council Statute as it failed to uphold the principles of the rule of law, human rights, and democratic pluralism. Russia's actions involved targeting civilians and infrastructure, and the invasion threatened European peace and security. Russia officially withdrew from the Council of Europe, but the Committee of Ministers also formally expelled Russia the same day, making it the first country ever expelled from the Council of Europe. Within the same year, Russia severed its commitment to the jurisdiction of the European Court of Human Rights, or ECHR, and its citizens lost access to protection. Since December 2023, Russia has had no representative on the CPT, claiming it was blocked from electing a new member. But Russia remained formally bound by some treaties, including the Anti-Torture Convention. This was the case until August 27, 2025, when Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin signed a decree proposing that President Putin submit the law to the State Duma, the lower house of the Federal Assembly of Russia. On September 17, 2025, Russia's State Duma voted to withdraw from the convention, and on September 29th, President Vladimir Putin signed a law officially withdrawing Russia from the convention. The Kremlin claims that the Council of Europe is biased and no longer serves its interests. Denouncing the treaty meant that Russia was now rejecting the European legal mechanisms. it had no more international legal accountability. So, what happens to the prisoners of war? Exiting the treaty is also an act of removing tools for monitoring their conditions. Prisoners of war are now more vulnerable to abuse without external inspections or legal recourse. On the other hand, Ukraine remains under the same anti-torture mechanisms as a member of the Council of Europe and is still bound to cooperate with international monitors. The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, or OHCHR in Ukraine, published periodic reports and briefings, including interviews with 434 Russian prisoners of war and 377 Ukrainian prisoners of war over the span of 18 months. The report shows that Russian forces handled POWs with severe ill treatment, particularly during early stages of capture or transit. Methods of alleged abuse include beatings through kicking, the use of batons, or metal pipes. Death threats were common, along with the use of electric shocks or electric devices, tasers, suffocation, and sleep deprivation. Some, even 68%, reported having experienced sexual violence, along with humiliation and mock executions. The OHCHR documented 621 cases of enforced disappearances. Among these victims, 5 were boys aged between 14 and 17. These minors were forcibly disappeared by Russian armed forces and subjected to ill treatment.
According to the UN, 91% of Ukrainians in Russian prisons and camps have been subjected to torture.
I found myself, together with my colleagues, in a situation when the law doesn't work. Russia brutally ignored all provisions of international law and all decisions of international organizations. But we have no other choice. We have to fight to release Ukrainian people in captivity because they are literally dying. They're going through hell, and it's not a metaphor. I spoke with hundreds of people who survived Russian captivity. They told me how they were beaten, raped, smashed into wooden boxes, their fingers were cut, their nails were torn away, they were electrically shocked through their genitalia. Knowing this, we have a clear understanding that part of these people have a very little chance to be alive till the end of this war. So we have no time. We have to do everything.
Russia often restricts ICRC access to Ukrainian POWs to control information, avoid external scrutiny of detention conditions, and possibly conceal violations or mistreatment. Denying access also gives Russia more leverage in negotiations and propaganda. Although there is an ongoing war, there has been a large prisoner of war swap between the countries. During the peace talks in Istanbul in early May 2025, Russia and Ukraine agreed to a bilateral exchange of 1,000 for 1,000. The exchange started on May 23rd, with the Ukrainian president announcing that Ukraine had returned 390 prisoners. The Russian Defense Ministry also returned the same number, including sick and wounded young soldiers and civilians. Moreover, this swap included the return of the remains of fallen soldiers on both sides, ending on May 25th. This was by far the largest prisoner exchange since the start of the invasion. But we might not see another swap soon. Now let's analyze what it means that Russia is no longer under CPT oversight. Russia effectively shuts down one of the last independent mechanisms for inspecting its prisons, detention centers, and military holding sites. The CPT allowed experts to conduct surprise visits and monitor how detainees, including prisoners of war and political prisoners, were treated. So by withdrawing, Russia removes this oversight, meaning reports of torture, abuse, or inhumane conditions are now much harder to verify. This lack of transparency is especially alarming during wartime, when credible evidence has already surfaced about the mistreatment of Ukrainian POWs and civilians in Russian-occupied territory. Since the invasion of Ukraine, Russia has pulled out of nearly all major European human rights frameworks, including the ECHR, and key arms control treaties like New START and the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty.